continuously happening. Because see, the thing is, and that's why I love when Brother Rich named it Infinity Matrix. I was like, man, I know we're going to do this, because that's exactly what it is. Because every time any kind of soul, I don't care how large it is, precipitates, which I call the participation, meaning you die, technically, your soul comes up out of your body like an ember. And it goes to make its place in the stars. And depending upon how bright it is, it determines the magnitude of how it comes back, because we keep coming back, or forward, as I always say, depending upon what direction you're going in. This is how the quote unquote reincarnation works. This is why it's always good to be in good standing with the Great Mother, because ultimately she's the only one that can really regulate in the deep. See, because the first layer, which is like considered like the moon. So imagine from the distance between sea level to the moon, that's called the first heaven or the first haven. Now take that area and subtract it from the depth of the ocean. So you'll go sea level, and then you'll go down as much as the distance between sea level and the moon on top. That whole realm right there, that's called the first heaven. That is the realm that the jackal, if you may, as you're going to know exactly who he is in a moment, that is the realm that he rules. So this is also why when most people go to sleep, they're generally in here, because they don't know how to go deeper, because all of the concepts and everything that they have is around this masculine God, which as you can see ain't a man at all. It's more like a boy, right? So at the reality is that there's like this realm, if you may, which is also corresponding to the influence that the moon has over the water, especially those on the surface, and it influences them. So it was known that really the higher that you ranked up, if you may, on your spine, you would pass through beyond the moon, who was the lowest one. The moon is also corresponds to your sexual organs. It's the first ladder. Then you will keep going up. And that's why they tried to show you the chakras in correspondence to planets, because you're really going through different spheres of the good reflections. If you're moving in the proper direction, you're going through the spheres of the good reflections of the hebdomad, i.e. the archons or the organs. These are the ones that were used to create the bodies.
Wow, we on track to the next thing, right? So, I'm definitely looking forward to what comes through. Respect and honors to the kings and queens that have, and the nobles that have showed up into the space, and are just here to, really, really dial in and really get something special together. So I'm excited about the collective energy that's coming. It was building in the beginning. It was getting me, like I said, it was getting me sick. I was like, the butterflies was in full metamorphosis, because your audience, the tribe here is just, it's so incredible. Lots of positivity. Like I couldn't find a negative comment. I was like, I stopped reading comments just so I didn't get a negative comment. I was like, good, I'm good on this. But yeah, just, delighted to be in the space. I know many have been looking forward to when we get a chance to come into orbit with each other again. So yes.
Indeed. Also, shout out to the chat. Y'all very important to what's going on. This couldn't happen without y'all. So you gotta, applaud yourself for being in the building tonight. And remember, your genes, your body's listening to everything you say to yourself. So, it's okay to salute yourself. It's okay to talk to yourself positive. And that's what this is all about tonight. Also, shout out to Q Reeves in the building, brother. I haven't interviewed this brother in a while. Also, that's another brother that's out there on the scene doing what he do. Shout out to that brother. Sevan, they say there's so many different paths to the light. You are a path. I've interviewed so many great people. I appreciate what you bring to humanity, the lessons, the teachings. You take this very serious, and I love when somebody's passionate about what they do, and I could definitely feel that. I don't hear that in your voice. I definitely feel that when you speak, my brother. So I want you to know I appreciate your passion for this universal knowledge that you share with the rest of the globe, my brother. I want to start out like that.
Thank you.
And with that being said, my brother, it's an amazing topic. I named it Melanin Time Travelers. That grabs the audience. They say time is thought. I hear some people say time is the fifth element. Time is the process, this divine mind uses to understand itself, they say. I like to relate this information because I don't want people to think we're in here for entertainment or for mental masturbation. And sometimes I like to use things going on in society and relate it to ancient knowledge and tie it together so we could solve problems we're having in this current paradigm using ancient knowledge. So one of the things that's one of the biggest problems right now in this world right now, Sevan, is mental illness. Not only mental illness, childhood trauma. A lot of the mental illness is triggered by childhood trauma that we all experience, and we all have different levels of childhood trauma, whether it's abuse, whether it's molestation, whether it's neglect, whether it's abandonment, just different levels of childhood trauma. What I want to ask you, my brother, starting out with talking about this topic, there's so many directions to go, whether it's multi-dimensional nature, and I want people to keep that in mind, or whether it's parallel universes or just so many things. But I want to start out by talking a little bit about the Negative Confessions, also known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So this is a list of 42 sins which the soul, and we all know what a soul is, of the deceased says that he has never committed when it stands in judgment in the afterlife. The soul will recite these in the presence of the God who weighed their truth and decided one's fate. Now, from what I understand and what I have read, because this is he's smiling, because this is a holographic reality, they say it's illusion, the Maya, different names for this being an illusion. The soul will get up there and say, let's say the soul got up there and said, I ain't do that. I ain't do that shit either. No, I ain't do that. I ain't do that. No, I ain't still. I was never down there. So imagine playing the game Street Fighter and you're Ryu. Ryu's the character and you're fighting in Bison. You would say, I was never Ryu. That was just a character. I'm not Ryu. I never fought M. Bison. I didn't do anything Ryu did to M. Bison. So saying that to say, my brother, connected it with childhood trauma. Knowing our multidimensional nature, can we go back? Time travel. Time is thought. Can we travel back to our childhood? Look at our childhood. It's say our father abuses, like MJ, Michael Jackson and his father. And we say to ourselves, I didn't get abused by my father because that was never me. Now, is that a form because you understand your multidimensional nature by saying, I'm not going to be affected with this as an adult because I was never abused because that was never me. I'm a projector lens or whatever you want to say it. Would you consider that a form of liberation or would you consider that a form of denial once you understand your multidimensional nature? Because this is all we're trying to use this ancient knowledge to help us, my brother.
Yeah. I mean, see that's exactly that. What you're talking about is exactly what I've been really centering into. Is just how, we got to take it from the top. So let's take it from the top.
Yes.
So the first thing is that just the sheer nature of the kind of beings that we are, we can connect to so many different things. So the first thing that I would probably suggest to everybody here is that you bring yourself actually here to this particular build. Right. So this is just for the audience to, take a moment and understand what you came here for is actually here. But if you're not here, there's absolutely no way for you to be able to receive it. And all of us are conduits in many ways. And when we understand the forms of communication that have been being used and how, you get not only transmissions, but you get upgrades and you actually do accomplish even the context of this build today, which is time travel. It's all centered around, some very, very what we'll make today basic principles. But it's not going to make sense if we don't do a few things. So the first thing is, again, like there'll be stuff that went on before this conversation. Like, as you know, when some power is about to come through, there'll be little quirks, like stuff's not turning on, stuff's not working, or, you completely blow the time frame or whatever. And then you'll kind of plan to come in a certain way. but now it's kind of like the click. It's kind of like it's off step, right? So for all of us, it's always important to realize that we can always just stop time and get in step, and then actually really go into some imploration and exploration, right? Like just the multi-lens of this, so that we can see exactly what we're doing. And then it's not really for a person to actually believe even what we're talking about, because they'll be able to see it and it'll make common sense to them. So that's kind of like the first prerequisite, though. You got to be here, and it's got to make a difference. And sometimes when you put paywalls and things in front of people, like they have to pay some money, they'll pay attention more because they invested.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
But
yes,
it's those who find esoteric knowledge very valuable, they'll pay attention too, because they know that it's value. Everything else in between, like you talk about people getting entertained, they need to be reminded that, hey, you know, it's still, this is about you, and this is about the high levels of what you've been asking about, even if sometimes you're just doing it subconsciously now, because you could be so many layers into the netherworld because of the narrative. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. I also wanted to bring us to that awareness, because what you really were talking about is, are you going to kill something, or are you going to heal it? Are you going to remove it altogether, like try to expunge that memory, or you're going to actually heal the situation? And the difference in between the two is the difference between life and death, to be honest, when you're talking about your energy center. And I want to get into that a little bit more here in a moment.
Yes.
But I just want everyone to also be aware that when you're going to perform any true surgeon's work on yourself, you're going to need to get ready to open yourself up. You're going to need to really do that. You're going to have to open yourself up. And because every time you get hurt, or every time you go through pain, you draw back. Also, the reality is designed for you to close. That's why we all wear clothes, because it's a consistent you hiding all of the private things about yourself. And when you do that, of course, it doesn't allow you to completely express who you are. And of course, if something happens to you when you close up, it deadens who you are. And, you know, I just want to, you know, bring that in right now, because that's the difference. Are you going to deaden yourself until eventually, as an organism, you don't care about anything? So then at that stage, you wouldn't be able to tap into what we call nature, what we call the stars, what we call hyper levels of existence, because you would lose your empathy. You would lose that ability to actually be able to dial into those very sensitive frequencies. Now, how do we dial into those? We dial into those because we have a magnetic system. It's the same way birds have a magnetic system to help them, one, orientate, and two, to be able to guide themselves. And so the reality is that if the organism's magnetic system is offline, that is really the byproduct of it. You will lose orientation, and you won't be able to actually understand where your path is. And so we also have to understand that as seeds, meaning that even as you've seen it, as far as how small the organisms such as the semen and the egg and the ovum and all that really are, is so small, you can already tell that the type of technology, if you made, that we're working with, and also so numerous. That's the other thing, like how many semen and you know, how many different opportunities there are to fertilize something. This would already let you know that you would be a seed from something else that would be the archetype of you. And just like you will drop seeds over the place, all over the place, plants drop seeds all over the place, men even be dropping seeds all over the place in the napkin and all this, just like your seeds could be all over the place, something can actually take your seed and take it to another galaxy and plant it somewhere else. And then it'll grow up. And what it'll be is like a mini version of the original tree. So humans have to realize that happened. That's what happened to us. Like when they're showing these entities with these bags and the grain as they call it, those seeds are like the seeds of our ancestors to birth entire nations, because those seeds are us and the DNA, right? So what we're talking about is we're talking about, first, like I said, if we go in the top-down approach, which I like because it's kind of like a bird's eye view, and it helps when you get into very deep conversation, because once we go deep, we have to still refer to the heights so that we stay, stay rejuvenated as we're going through the process, right? Like to be able to see the sun, it gives happiness, it gives hope, it gives desires, it gives many different things to the world, right? So it's like you having both of those components in these journeys is key. So the first thing I wanted to bring up, just from the top of this thing is what a super civilization is. Because, many are considering with the world, like what is happening and where are we going with this and what's going to happen. And then there's all these narratives being written. And I wanted to just make sure everybody understands that, because is that we already are coming from at least a type 2 civilization, because we realize how to harness energy from a star. And this art of harnessing stars is what you would call genetics, okay? Because the gen in genetics is about stars, and it's about spirits, and it's about specifically spirits that have a specific kind of energy. So what our ancestors were engaged in doing is they were engaged in building organisms and experiences. And now we're inside of this super hacked experience, because the holiest of holies has been breached, which is your consciousness. Because, and the reason why it's been breached is because, like, your dream in many ways can start serving you up things that you don't really want to see. And sometimes your dreams will intentionally somehow get hacked in a certain way, and you have this experience that you don't want to have. And then when you get up, you be like, man, I'm glad that wasn't that. I'm glad that was a dream.
Yes.
And the truth is that when you're going through that experience, like, you're going through a lot of trauma. Like, some people can wake up and their pillows will be hot with tears. It'll be so much sadness in what they experience within this dream. So if we rewind again to, let's say, even the origins of things, we have to realize that we're beings that we didn't use languages initially. The only purpose of a language is really to be able to say a shape. And the only use for doing that, which is called evocation, is to create something in physical realities. What we're calling physical realities. However, there is original faculty that we still have right now, which is why you dream, which was the original way that we communicated, which was through image. Right? So we would send whatever it is that we wanted to communicate to each other through imagery and through feeling and senses, not through language. And so when you can think of when language gets introduced, it's more of like the dark day of the mind. Because now a mind that used to be able to, when you close your eyes, that you could see things just as clear as you see things with them open, but you would see whatever you thought about. That faculty now being where when you close your eyes, you see mostly only darkness, and you cannot create images until you, one, give up basically consciousness of the body. That means go to sleep. And then, so basically reach a certain relaxed state to where you detach from the body, and then this olfactory, this system actually starts working automatically. But when it starts working, it is out of control. Like, because which of course in control would be technically a lucid dreamer, somebody who can control the dream, right? And so now that, we're, like looking at it from that level, and we're saying, okay, so can we move back into the past and remove ourselves from an action or an event? And in order to kind of like, well, because the context of the story was to kind of say, well, that wasn't me, or to remove myself from the situation so that situation never occur.
Yes.
But the situation did occur. So what happens is that when we start messing around with time, which would be to wrestle around in our mind, like I'm going to erase that. We have to understand that what we actually do to ourselves as an organism is we go to the place that it is inside of us, and we kill it, and we seal off and cut off the area. Okay? Now, the important part of seeing it that way is that what happens if you seal off and cut off all of your senses, all like your heart, your brain, because all these different things that you don't like are lodged into these different parts of your real organism. In order for you not to feel it anymore, you have to go and actually, you have to, so you see what I'm saying? Like, this is something that's often missed. It's like, how do you stop caring? Like, when you don't care anymore, like, people don't care about the planet anymore. You know why? They're like, man, shit, I'm already dealing with it. How am I going to think about the planet? So it's technically, it's like it's a state of awareness where the being does not feel anymore. And if you look at the reality with all the cartoons or all of the TV shows, and somebody get their head blown off and something happens, and now there's a racial war, and so then it starts to just become I don't like. But if you say specifically, and this is just the awareness, because this is all one organism. If you don't like even a specific race, you start killing that race inside of you. So if a nation was the heart of the earth and you don't like that nation anymore in your mind, you kill your heart. But that goes across the board for everybody. So even if another group of or nation is the brain of the organism and we don't like that being, we start killing our brain. Literally, that's how it all works. It's a feedback system that it was like so it was like when the design was created, there was never a greater design. So they just chose to continue to use the same design. This is what we're in. So that way, when we ever identify the design, we would identify everything. So it's not that, oh, there's a bunch of varieties. No, there's one design that can put forth a bunch of varieties. They say, oh, the big thing is made up of a bunch of small things. So it's a paradox. And when you start learning how to navigate it, it starts requiring you to, because like in these times, for instance, we've been discussing how, like, where you would be because we're a magnetic vehicle.
Yes.
If you stop caring, you would kind of be on the side of your vehicle.
Okay.
Because you wouldn't basically be attracted to your vehicle. That's why when you see magnets come, they snap together, right? If you ever get out of the body, you'll find that when you get closer to your body, you snap back in. Like it's like a magnetic attraction because the whole field is magnetic. But when you don't want to be in the experience anymore because of pain and not caring, see, this is all stuff going on behind the scenes of the real organism that we're actually in. So when you stop caring, you stop attracting to the body. And so you start being on the side of the body. And being on the side of the body actually then allows the other things that you've created, what we call the eidolons, entities, spirits, etc. The other things that you create, because your whole system is just like one big orgasmic system. How is the heart pumping? Like, have you ever sat down and listened to just somebody's heart and just for a moment be like, man, this thing be pumping for like 80, 90 years. What battery do we have go 80, 90 years pumping?
Facts. Yeah.
You see what I mean? So it's like, we're just like now at this stage where since 2023 is coming, we have to realize we're at the height now of the knowledge of men. Like now all is disclosed. So it's easy now to see the narratives, meaning the stories that have basically caught our people up into just a complete loop and even a self-destruct sequence. We have to realize that we're such powerful beings. Any story that you're hearing about life and about existence, you still have to weigh whether or not that story is even real. Because of how the magnitude of what we're actually in. Because the thing is that you need to go with knowledge that cannot be refuted. What we call the gems. The gems, nobody can steal them from you because they rob themselves of it. It's like the moment they steal the gem, they rob themselves of the gem. It's like the real things in life that you would have to truly, truly seek. But now notice this though, what I was reading about the type of civilization. When the civilization is very advanced, it utilizes the energy that is already being delivered to it. Like right now, we on a planet, and every day, like if you're out in the hot sun, that sun has got energy coming off of it, and a panel will take the energy and store the energy somewhere, right? But that's not all that the energies that are moving around, but that's one of them. But notice how if we got to mine every day, which is what going to work is. Because when you go to work, you got to use your mind, so you're mining. That's all the mining the gold stuff, right? Like it's like now that you're going to mine, it means that you're on a whole backwards ass technology now because you don't need to mine. Like what do we mine for? We mine for resources, and resources are energy.
Yes.
Right? But if energy is already coming, all we would need to do is just put ourselves in the position to receive. We wouldn't have to be miners. This is why magic doesn't work very well in these new systems that they've created with all these different entities and all this kind of stuff. Most of that shit don't even work. This is why most of the people that use it, they still be living at their grandma's house. You don't actually see the proof of the wisdom of the type of people that it's supposed to produce. And this is something where we would have to just look at personally as ourselves and be like, okay, check, it doesn't work. What's next? And you just got to be in your paint by yourself. It doesn't matter if everybody else agrees that it doesn't work. Like religious systems don't work. They're broken for real. They're about religion. So anytime they start talking about Jesus or any of that stuff, get away from it. It's not even something you should play with, the entities that play around with that, right? But yet, you know, even right now, it's like they're cooking off a half-baked, I talked about it's like a half-baked Antichrist. We get like a B-rated movie Antichrist. This is how watered down the reality is. Even the prophecies are coming out like watered down, like, damn, I thought the Dajjal was going to have like one eye, and like with the other color eye, they was going to come from the east. They was going to be flowing with robes. The sky was going to get dark. You know what I mean? They had like this, and it'd be just Kanye West and Alex Jones sitting up there dooming everybody and dooming the system and dooming themselves because they bought into a narrative. And then you got to think, okay, so will those beings rapidly be making it to a type 1, type 2, type 3 civilization? Because that's when you got to look back in yourself and say, what kind of civilization is this? Like all of these beings that I got that live inside of me, how is the real communication going on between the king and his land, right? Which is the body. And if people miss that, for instance, like the whole thing is so super connected. The ley lines that run down the earth, which are the same ley lines people go down when they die. Like, do you know when you die, you go down a highway right away? It's called, and they're straight lines. That's what they call the old straight track. And cemeteries generally are always where the big like the LAX or the ATL of where the whole transfer is about to go, because this thing is definitely not finna waste anything what we're in. People be thinking they're gonna die. Do you think you could get out of it that easy? See, we created death because we were afraid of life. We needed something to kind of stop life and start life over again, because we would get headlong into infinity crazy stuff that we needed to be like, okay, we need to stop and start again. You know, sometimes that happens in your life where you like, man, look, let me start over again in life. So that's called death, but it's not real. And what this is about now is like, so you got an ancient system, right? So now when I say type 3 civilizations, all you had to do was read in the book that I said, the Alien Rooms and Alien Experience for the Tsars, which were the Sudanese women, were calling upon Zarin or Jinn from the stars and impregnating women with the entities, okay, which is the core of most of the magic you're looking at today. And a bad replica, by the way, because they don't know the rituals. They don't know the entities. Most of the entities are unclean. There's a whole different language to talk to these other beings. And the oracles and the czars, they were the mermaids, etc. They were the ones that spoke that language. So when they cut off their mother, like what you see Orion is sitting there, you know, he's hitting his mother Taurus. When they cut off their mother, they really could not actually continue to interface with all these high levels of knowledge and wisdom, because it takes a certain level of ground and power, but it doesn't mean that you won't be able to impress everybody on a type 1 civilization or like a third world.
Mm.
You know, they always talk about third world country, right? What about a third world where you come there and the cats are still fighting each other? They didn't have any reached singularity yet. What is singularity? It has nothing to do with some computer systems. Those are the replica byproducts, Borg. Real singularity is when the organism, which is made up of positive and negative currents, is magnetic field, which we call a torus. But in that process, this field is unified and working together, but consists of opposing poles. This is the same thing as if a male and a female are together, and then they, even though they're different, they decide to bring their two energies together to work for something that's going to benefit the two. Versus male and female could be together totally in conflict, not feeling each other, feeling the opposing forces, choose not to work together, but still be around each other, but actually be working against each other. You see, that's the easiest way to understand the field that you're talking about, because when you start thinking of positive and negative, you'll get caught up because you think negative is the bad one and positive is the good one. We went beyond that, right? Mm-hmm. But then most people never went beyond that because they're still trying to find the bad one and the good one. They still have this good category and bad category to place everything in. But the truth is, again, the reason why we have nighttime, the reason why bad things do happen to us, the reason why we have bad dreams, et cetera, is because we're not made up of completely good. Mm-hmm. We're not beings that are what you would call good. We're not beings that are just made up of one pole. So now, you know, this process, you know, just zooming in again to what you're asking, the process is that you would go through and you would actually heal these situations. Now, there's a standard way that people kind of look at healing, and they think of forgiveness. Like, I got to forgive it. And then they just be like, well, I can't. A lot
of people think,
yes. The thing is about the organism, again, that we're in is when you're trying to do something that requires the body with the mind, it's not possible. So watch this. So the mind, it is fascinated with power and knowledge and all of this stuff, right? Like the mind, if you let it tell you, it's the most powerful thing. And it can talk about all of that, but be put into a situation and start cowering itself. Because courage, it comes from the body. It comes from this, right? Like, so all this is like, now you got to go and do. That's why your hands are here. That's why your feet are here. You got to go and do what you were talking about. So you can say in your mind, man, I'm the most toughest. And then when a situation pop off, now your body is involved. You see what I mean? So the mind will be like, but because it's up to the body now to show how courageous it really is. You see what I mean? So this is where the mind has to be in alignment with the body, because folks be trying to like be just the mind and fly off. And the problem is that then they can never heal. Mm. See, it takes courage to come back in the body. That's why they be trying to leave. Mm. And the reality in the society, it perpetuates this, leaving our responsibilities, leaving our creations. Mm. If we were the originals, we created everything. No different than something must have created us. No different than something must have created that until you get into the motionless, which we will not speak of. Like that was really the knowledge that they was like, this is the black goo, this is the dark matter. We don't talk about it because we know it's the access point basically to our infinite. It's like anytime we feel like something's not possible, we ping that and it overcomes everything. It's not something that we have to, this is kind of like why in Islam, in the truest tense of it, you don't draw pictures of God. You don't try to even call God, say God's name or nothing like that. It's something that's kept into like, no. Come on, we won't even assume that you would think you know what you were talking about in the state that you're in. So then what it would do is it would be able to set up like goals for us, like things that we know that, hey, I'm going to eventually reach that stage. Now we believe sometimes that we just already have accelerated the entire ladder. So, and then we'd be still struggling, still can't figure out what's going on in the matrix, this kind of stuff. So that's why I said the mind's got to align with the heart. And so this is a good time during this build to just really, really lay, esoteric knowledge in itself, mechanics to the realm that we're actually living in, entities that, are in the space, et cetera. All that stuff can be very clear.
it could be clarified, and that does kind of depend on, just the host in himself, though, because, the host, the host is the key to harnessing the power and the potential of the guest.
The host.
And bro, Rich is
that's what I do. I harness. I literally harness the. That's why they love me. I harness. I listen, Sevan. My mission is to not as the host of this show, but even I'm a music producer. Even as a music producer, even in life, I could bring the best out of somebody. And I noticed, Sevan, and this you don't have to respond to this because I'm about to go on to the next question. In life, what I noticed that I even had the ability to bring the worst out of a person. And that's when I realized my power. I could bring the best or the worst out of a person. So I choose to bring the best out instead of bringing the best because I know how to evoke emotion. That's one of my superpowers. I can evoke emotion. I could, from somebody. I could draw it from somebody. So I'd rather draw the best than the worst out of somebody. Yes. But I'm absolutely glad we started the way we started, my brother. I mean, the chat is absolutely super glad that with the way we started and you answered my question. Your name is Sevan, though. I want to go into this, Sevan. Your name is Sevan. Powerful name. Powerful name. Sevan is written all over the Bible. It's written in stories and movies. Seven this, seven that, seven this. If we start the days of the week with Sunday, Saturn, which they say is Saturday, becomes the seventh day. So 7 Saturday. 7 is connected numerically to Saturn. So talking about Saturn and talking about time travel, because they say Saturn, they call Saturn Father Time. They say Saturn is connected to time. One of the things I noticed you said in the past, and I want to ask you about Saturn. It seems as though no matter what I talk about in the occult realm, Saturn pops out of nowhere. Whatever I talk, Saturn just seems to always pop up, no matter what I'm talking about. So if your name is Sevan and 7 is Saturn, I heard you say before an ancient name for Saturn was Zervan. Am I right, sir? Zervan?
Zervan, yes.
Zervan. So this is something 90% of the population never heard it before. And when you said that, Sevan, it made me do a little research, and I was researching on the internet, and it said that a Phoenician historian by the name of Sancoathon or something like that, who he's believed to lived before the Trojan War, recorded that the ancestors of the Phoenician was Cronus, which is Saturn, and they called Saturn Israel.
Mm-hmm.
That's some deep shit.
Wow.
So an ancient name for Saturn is Israel? I need you first. Are you moving around? That's body language. 7 is like.
Well, no, I'm readjusting. Like I was sitting on that
that's
one.
Body language.
Yeah.
So keep it in mind what you said about Saturn being called Zervan, which the majority of us has never heard of, and even they saying Phoenician historians is saying the ancient name for Saturn, they called it Israel. Saturn is the Lord of time. We're talking about time travel. You got to tell me a little bit of history about Saturn and all the stuff I just mentioned. Israel, Zervan, all of that, my brother.
Yeah, you know how they say we live life forward, but we understand it backwards.
Yes, sir.
And, I can definitely say that in my life, I have only been able to learn from my experiences, but it takes me to have to look at my experiences. So even when we're kind of cruising through life and we're getting these names, because, sometimes you get a nickname, my first name is James. So what do all these names mean? Right? Like if James itself, it basically means son of Yah, right? So what we've learned in the same, or not, if not identical, but very similar system to what's his name, Lord. It's a gentleman that you have on your show who's excellent with the numbers.
Lord Strayhorn. Lloyd Strayhorn. I'm sorry, Lloyd Strayhorn.
Which is, this ancient system of numbers, which is Joytisha, is so replete. It gives to me the best definition of what numbers can do and how to really dissect the code today. So when I started looking at just the notion that, especially a first name, like the destiny number, the first name, the first letter, the first vowel, that you were able to basically get a superficial snapshot of what the person is like. Okay. And this is, of course, until they graduate the game. Because in itself, the game is a series of numbers from 1 to 9. So actually 7 is a secondary system. Like 9 is the real system. 7 is the absence of the 2 other colors, which is black and white. Okay. Right. So this is when you start understanding that numbers are actually entire archetypes within themselves, which host ideals that will always be present in the realm. They are like in themselves things that can be pinged because they signify the processes of the creation of life within this realm, right? And so it redundifies all the way down to the finest of forms. So what I assume happens is because, again, you know, like you would say your mother gave you the name because your mother, as we've seen in the legalese and what goes on with, you know, how they even form a new entity and all of that with the legal system is that the mother is the informant. She's the one that's filling out the form. And so in that way, it's kind of like, well, the mother is going to be giving the name to the child. And then with everything in the matrix, you always have this quote unquote positive side of it and negative side of it. And then the necessity of balancing that. And in the event that you end up balancing out that path, then, you know, it's like if you master any path, you will be able to basically see the algorithm that exists within all paths. So I believe that this life, it is highly possible that I arrived in this path of severity, as it's called, because I definitely have went through a lot, and I can definitely see how I've had to really, really just be in my own lane, not like so easy to bend and break. I've had to be basically very, very rigid even in my own personal ideals of what I think is possible here in this planet and the potential of what could happen. I can for sure say that I've wrestled, like many have, against the negative side of a lot of that power. And we talked about before how, first of all, you survive in the test of time. So what I believe is that you should just always keep it on the level. What you see is what you get. And because when I came into this, I didn't come into this like without having my whole slate wiped clean already. So it wasn't like anything that I was expecting from the conscious community or expecting from anything for that matter. I actually was looking for that next level up onto another situation because I already seen it. I had already touched it. I've already been into something that is of such a high level of energetics. And it's just simply because, like, on this side, it seems like energy is scarce. But the truth is that there's more energy than you can even handle. So what it really becomes about is how you handle your energy. And so on this path, there's a lot of energy moving through. And I felt like because I was like one smarter in that way, like I knew, yo, don't let the energy take you out. And I've always had a lot of control over my mental consciousness. When I was seeing a lot of that Saturnalian kind of energy moving through, which is a father energy for sure. Like I have a whole breakdown of this. I'm not even going to go through it right now, but I talk about Venus and Saturn. Like even that numerology system that Strayhorn is working with comes from Shukra, who is Venus, but then Venus becomes Lucifer now. Satan becomes the devil. And so all these things are re-engineered in many ways. And that's what I find about the narrative is that whatever it can be to make it negative for you, or what I would say is distorted for you, is kind of how the reality cooks it up. So they will focus on this quote unquote negative side of Saturn or negative side of Mercury or negative side of Jupiter and bring that and just kind of miss that the whole system is that these are the organs in the body that we're talking about. And 7 in the body is actually the bowels, right? Which they call Baal, right? So this is the part of the body that's responsible for removing toxins. So if you don't defeat Baal, if you may, or put Baal in alignment, then your whole reproductive system and your root chakra and your finances won't won't grow. They won't be of any substance, right? You won't have a vigor. You won't have a legacy. You won't have loins, which is like a lion. And then, so when you look at the symbolism of, again, if we're going to go into Israel, what you're looking at is you're looking at basically a system of knowledge that is, again, taken from the mother, though. I mean, it's cut and clear, you know, that, again, the oracles were the ones where in the Vatican. The oracles are in the Vatican. The Jesuits that are there now are sitting on the portal, like the Kwisatz Haderachs and the covens and all that. They're sitting on the portal so they can get information and knowledge that's coming to this planet before, you know, people have that knowledge and information or can divine that knowledge and information. So they hack that information. You know, there's a lot of, you know, great atrocities that are happening really in the space, even though if we want to stick our heads in the sand, like there's been the whole cover blown off of that. Our children are basically really being harvested for their energy. And there's untold atrocities happening in the dark. And as I said before, because the narrative, which is, you know, even some of this ancient alien narrative and this kind of stuff is almost like it's like you don't even have much of the pages of the book of the beings that you're actually talking about, let alone to kind of realize what kind of time and space they would be living in and what they're doing. But then yet we've adapted their entire culture. And their entire story. And in this way, I'm talking about the Abrahamic traditions and all of that theos, which is not native to this world, if you may, meaning that all that didn't start here. And so a lot of times we have to even ask ourselves, as I said, again, since you just in this little maximum 72-year turn, this time of existence, before, you know, you go into your next existence, you have to ask yourself if you want to spend your life actually doing the same thing that you already have seen somebody else do and fail and reach nothing. Because that's the beauty of being in the future. Like, we're thousands of years after many prophecies. We're hundreds of years after people have said certain things to see what the results of what they said, like what happened. And so if we're examining such things, it should give us a really sound idea of where we should go, like what is really the truth and what we should be doing with our life and our soul. And I know a big part of that is for sure about caring, because it's a dead ringer that the reality, as I mentioned before, so how this planet works and how this organism works and how the atoms and everything work is that you actually, if you can connect to them, they are your protection. So it's almost like if somebody's coming and get to you and it's just they've trees fall in their way and, you know, stuff's not working, the stuff rusts, gas goes out of the car, the whole nine, because it's like all of nature, which is everything the planet is made out of. No matter what you're talking about, everything here is made from nature and just refined into something different, but it all comes from nature. So when you're connected to the planet, all those things are actually in service to you as you are in service to it, because you're actually connected to it. So when we become disconnected from the planet, we lose our protection, because our protection is the planet. It's not magic from a sense of like occult books, circles, spells, all these kind of things. All that stuff is called lesser grimoires. Any magician knows this. These are like the scraps from the table of a mage. And now we can, you know, I don't also like to talk over the head of anybody either, because obviously this is 14 years just in the public working with spiritual, occult, and esoteric knowledge. So for me, it would be a little bit different than the standard person, because the time that they spend even at work, I spend that time reading through something and connecting things. That's why we all work together, because then I can just tell you what I know and I can bring you up to speed. And you will have to trust that, well, shoot, you know, he's going to obviously be a little bit more exact because he has the time to spend in it. So that's how we used to do it in ancient times. We would technically pay somebody to go out to the woods and don't contact anybody and just keep getting stronger spiritually. We would take care of them and let them do their thing, especially if they showed they had an affinity for it. Because
these beings were, of course, very, very valuable because now if you think about what I was saying before earlier about a type 3 civilization, what is it, or type 2, what is it to communicate with a star? A star is a vibratory frequency. And we already understand now that every vibratory frequency, which is light, which is memories, it contains data. So when you start being able to actually extract data from stars, not energy, because I know someone immediately was like, well, shoot, if the sun is there and we can get solar power, what kind of power can we get from other stars and they're so dim? Exactly. It wouldn't be that kind of power that raw power you're going to use to power a vehicle. It's actually data and information. And what you would have to do first, though, is you would have to put your vehicle in the condition that when you receive that information, that your vehicle just didn't go into all-out warfare with itself. You see what I mean? That's like when you talk about mental health, this is mental warfare going on. And it's the proponent is that the God that is in this realm right now, his name is war. So you go to work because that's war, W-O-R. They worship. W-O-R. So it becomes very easy to track beings, if you may, through the code, through just three-letter words, three-letter numbers, right? But I would still, or three-letter words and stuff like that. But I would suspect, because I've asked these things about even myself, like even, you know, my name, James Evans Bomar III, because Sevan is just Evans with S moved in the front of it. But before that, people call me Sevan because I realize in Atlanta, the last thing you want is cats knowing your name. I'll pause for that. The last thing in line you want is cats know your name. So I just like, look, just call me a number. So that way, right away, you know that ain't my name. Right. So then later on, I realized in my middle name that if the S was in front, that it was Sevan. And so I rolled with that because at the end of the day, something will happen in the consciousness and it will sometimes tell you that's, as Strayhorn probably have mentioned, that your middle name is what you can be. So they say that your first name is what you are, the middle name is what you can be, like you could float to it, and then your last name is what you were.
Damn,
right?
my middle name is Michael, man.
In other cultures, they got like 4 or 5 last names, but that's what it represents, right? Because it represents the lineage of the last name, right? But now you're carrying all of that, or you lost it. And so this is also the thing about where we're at right now with all of this is that our relics have basically been hijacked. Our technologies have been stolen. And it looks like to us that the things that we should be using are actually the things that are creating bad things in the planet. That's pretty much what the narrative is right now, like pyramids and what all this means. As a simple concept, what a pyramid means is when you take all your energies and focus it into a point. And you need to learn how to do that anyway. It's called focus. So if you brought that into a external world and then created a chart for men to rule over each other and then said, that's what the pyramid is. And then everybody ran off and believed that because that was like the top-down system that you would kind of visualize when there's like a hierarchical structure with the military. You see how it's like there could be a conflict of the definition of the maximum of the symbol. Right. And then so this would then require you, because everybody is going to have an issue in the matrix with what you're doing as you're pushing through the matrix. So there's going to be people that it's kind of like that whole thing where they're trying to find something wrong with you. And people, to me, I'll be laughing at them because they don't understand I spend all day doing that, trying to find something wrong with me. So I'm like, yeah, help me, because I want to make sure that if there's anything out of alignment, that we got that thing in alignment, because that's how I know I stay in tune and I can keep receiving. So that's why when the transmission come in, because I'm going through my process through of healing, right? But I've learned to stop killing. I've learned how powerful that I can be when I really don't like something or someone or even whole nations. Because how powerful are you really? And that's why most people don't have any power, because if they get some power, they would just destroy us all. Yeah. Because we didn't bring them sandwiches or something, something petty. Like we act like we're not coming off of a clear past where people have had issues with power. They get a little bit of stuff and they're already trying to boss up over everybody. This is not the guy that you give control of the entire tribe to, right? So we have a situation because
See, in many ways, the beings that are lording over the reality, which are like dogs, they're like in themselves like what they call the master race. And a master race is more like how a dog will kind of corral sheep and corral goats. So it's not like it's smarter than the sheep or the goat. It just has a different demeanor and a way to corral and control. So you can see how genetically what's happening is that when you do get deep into the netherworld, because you were beginning this build today with reading off what is incorporated in the Isles of Osiris, which is basically where your heart is about to be raided and that your organs are going to come and testify against you. So these organs, which are the seven, right? They in themselves, they call themselves the archons. Okay, because they're the organs, right? And these systems themselves are in agreement. They agreed on Mount Harmon, which is where we get the word harmony from. And they agreed to do this thing. And what that means is that just how your heart and your lungs and your spleen and your kidney, and they all do different things, they all play a different tone or a different vibration, but they all work together to accomplish the great work, which is actually bringing you back to life from the Isles of the Dead, from the netherworld. Now, the netherworld was already known from deep times before the sun got here. That's why it says that the sun or the spirit itself was hovering over the waters of the deep. So the waters were already there. And in those waters, there was degrees in the netherworld. So these beings, what you would say is semi-aquatic, you would say them amphibian, you would say them even reptilian, also very vast, because generally when you're in a very large space and gravity is not interacting on you, you get big. Just like when you put certain fish in a bigger fish tank, they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, so they get as big as a fish tank. Nobody has traversed the ocean because it's a galactic thing, like what you would call like a galactic law. Right. The cutoff is at the shore. And then when you get on the ocean, you're supposed to be a sovereign, because if you're on the water and you don't know how to produce what it is that you need, then you'll die out there. Also, you need to know how to navigate, because you'll get lost out there. So the ocean is the real outer space, okay? But the deep in itself and the entities in which that live in the deep, the way a person ends up arriving there is when the debts from their lives, where they're asking for a variety of things, and they're saying that they're willing to give something to receive that. So this is basically even the root itself of what we call magic, which is asking entities for things. This is why in the religion, which is the root of a lot of this, people are constantly asking this God for things, assuming that in the event that they receive it, that it doesn't want anything back. And in addition to that, they never catch that it's only until they're very fervent about asking what they need do they get it. And it's because it's with their own energy. That if you entreated for something, meaning you wanted something so bad that you just really sent out a vibration that I wanted, the real want, not the real need. It gets into needs, right? When you can send out that kind of frequency, it'll happen because it happens on your own power. But many people, they subscribe partners, as it's called. They basically say, well, it was because of Jesus that I got this car. When really much of everything that was conducted, if not everything that was conducted to receive that, was done from the person's own energy. But there's a broker there. I got to get some water here in a minute. Now, this broker.
Take your time, brother. Take your time.
Because this is important. This broker, because it's what happened to the spiritual system. These brokers are like now the ones that are actually mastering these contracts and signing these contracts and creating these contracts, because what they do is they get between a person and their energy, basically. Your highest level or higher self, they kind of get in between you and your higher self, and they try to broker a deal between you and your higher self. Believe it or not, as silly as it sounds, it even sounds more silly when you imagine that we fall for it. And humanity will fall for giving their energy away to something else to receive something that will be less valuable than the value of the energy that they gave. So it's a bad deal. And that's really what it becomes to actually be a sovereign, is that you actually have to learn how to come into your life and basically be the Lord and the master of your life and stop subscribing to entities or idols. Now, this is interesting because like there's a lot of idolization. But the reason why idolization to a god is forbidden is because it basically makes you send all your energy to something else. And if you're not familiar with what that is, like we are supposed to be familiar with our ancestors, right? So when the connection with our ancestors is severed, we don't have to go to anything external to connect that, to reconnect that. We don't have to go to some statue that's supposed to be it, some name even that's supposed to be it. We only just, because it's not felt that way is what I'm saying. It can't be felt externally. This is also what happens when somebody dies, and why a lot of people can't communicate with somebody that died. It's because you never really knew them. You never sat there for hours and stared in their eyes.
Powerful.
Like we don't have intimate relationships like this anymore because